In our world, it can be a very serious thing to tell the truth about what is occurring around the condition we call transgenderism. If you oppose transgenderism for reasons of conscience, and if transgenderism surgeries are happening, for example, transitional surgeries are happening and they're not supposed to be, and you call that out rightly for purposes of truth, you can find yourself in very hot water indeed. That is true in the case of a Christian woman named Vanessa Sivadge. She was recently fired wrongly, I believe, from Texas Children's Hospital for opposing wrongful procedures done to minors. That was not what the hospital was reporting was going on. There was some Medicaid fudging happening. And so Sivadge bravely and wisely and biblically called this out and was fired as a result of doing so. When I heard about this, I had already heard her stand that she was taking along these lines. I wanted to get her on the podcast on Grace and Truth and talk to her personally about this. It's a great honor to have her. Before I turn things over to Vanessa, though, to hear about her background and where she is now and how things are going, I want to just welcome everybody to Grace and Truth. My name is Owen Strachan. I will be your host. Please subscribe to the podcast, review the podcast, share the podcast on all relevant platforms, especially episodes like this one, where we're trying to take a small, humble stand for truth as people who are doing so and facing consequences for it. It's a huge help to her and to us for you to share this. Vanessa, without further ado, welcome to Grace and Truth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really grateful for you joining me. I know it's a busy time for you. You were just fired from Texas Children's Hospital, again, in my judgment, unjustly. Can you walk us through, in brief form, there's more we can double click on, the whirlwind you've been in the last few months?
Absolutely. It's really an honor to speak with you today. So thank you for sharing my story with your listeners. On August 16th, just over a week ago of 2024, I was officially fired from the nation's largest children's hospital, Texas Children's Hospital. And that came as a result of a couple of things over the last several months. For those of you who, for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with my story, I'll just summarize it. In June of 2024, I came forward publicly with my name and my identity with journalist Christopher Rufo to reveal that Texas Children's Hospital was utilizing Medicaid to cover cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers for children. And this was in violation of the Texas Medicaid policy, which has been in effect for the last 10 years, since 2015. And that is completely separate from the law that was, the bill that was signed into law last year by our governor. So that policy prohibiting coverage of gender affirming care for children has been in place for the last 10 years. And so because I worked in a clinic with providers who were seeing children confused about their sex, I had firsthand, witness account and saw this every day that children had either Medicaid, CHIP, or STAR insurance is listed on file, and lo and behold, they're on puberty blockers because they're medically transitioning to the opposite sex. And this was something that was very evident to any nurse or clinician working at the hospital. And so I came forward to bring that to light in June. And I also revealed that doctors were misdiagnosing patients intentionally, which is also a violation of the law. But they were doing this to justify the prescription of these cross-sex hormones to children. So two accounts of fraud, two examples of fraud that I witnessed. And so I just came forward really because the fact that American tax dollars are being used to fund these interventions that will bring irreversible harm and a lifelong regret to the children that participate. I couldn't, in good faith and in good conscience, not come forward to reveal that. I felt Americans have to know that what their tax dollars are going towards. And so that's exactly what happened in June.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this story in June and immediately recognizing, as I got hold of the basic facts, that by all accounts, you had done something very brave, and you had done something that seemed like it caused you to stand alone or very close to alone. I have a lot of different questions to ask you, but one of them would be, you're so far, I think there was a resident, a physician in residence, who also blew the whistle about this hospital with regard to transgender care, air quotes. Has anyone else stood up with you, or are you literally alone in doing so?
So far, Dr. Heim, who is now public, his identity is public, he was actually the inspiration for me coming forward to begin with. He came before me. So he was the whistleblower right before me who came forward anonymously in May of 2023. And he revealed with Christopher Rufo that the hospital had concealed the existence of this transgender program from the public. So the largest children's hospital in the nation, Texas Children's Hospital, had scrubbed the transgender program from their website. By all accounts, on the outside looking in, no one, no lawmaker, no parent could tell that the hospital was in fact providing cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers to children. And that's because the Attorney General of the state of Texas had issued a very strongly worded opinion and had said that if any hospital was providing these treatments, that they could be investigated for child abuse. And so the hospital released numerous statements stating that they were no longer participating in these treatments for kids. And of course, that was all a lie. They were continuing to do it behind closed doors. And so what Dr. Heim did very courageously is he came forward to reveal that that was still happening. And as a result of him doing that, 2 days later, the Texas legislature voted to essentially end gender affirming care in Texas under the age of 18. And because of the story that had gone viral a few days before, there were numerous Democrats in the Texas legislature that flipped their votes to vote in favor of this. So this was a huge story that had a massive effect that, and by all accounts, ended this in Texas.
So it strikes me that probably what's going on is leftism as an ideology has taken hold in this humongous hospital. It's in a red state, America's most famous red state, frankly, Texas. And so there are these warring visions of the human person and transgenderism and what constitutes care. And it's all playing out in this one hospital. Texas leaders, public officials get word of this and take action. But even after that, according to you, these terrible practices continue to be practiced, to be carried out. Am I getting that accurately? Yes. Yeah. The hospital lied. They lied to the public. And so it was a very powerful thing when, for those of you who don't know my story, I was working in this clinic for 3 years, and all this time having this, weekly, I would come home to my husband in tears because I hated I cannot even emphasize what it's like to read through patient charts and to see the pain and the turmoil that these children have, that not only are they confused about their sex, which is a very difficult thing, in and of itself, but also that they have anxiety and depression and they're autistic and they've had abuse in their past and they've gone to the emergency room for self-harm or suicide attempts. And it's just like, as a nurse, you put all of this together and you're just like, this is horrific. This is so, so horrific. And I almost quit because I knew what was happening was wrong, morally wrong. Yeah. And so the courage of one person, which was Dr. Heim, he came forward, and that prompted me to then come forward anonymously in May of 2023. And that just did something for me because it made me realize that I wasn't alone, that there was someone else that also felt and saw the things that I did that was deeply concerning. And so that's ultimately the impetus for why I came forward when I did. And because you're in Texas, I think I can say this safely. There probably were other people, maybe even a lot of people, who saw these things unfolding I'm just conjecturing, and had a problem with it, or were uncomfortable with it, or were openly opposed to it in their own conscience. But the left chilled the environment, made it very difficult to speak up. Of course, you lose everything. You lost your job, recently. If you stand up, is it accurate, Vanessa, just in an informal way, to say there were other people who saw this stuff going on and were very uncomfortable with it, but for whatever reason they weren't comfortable speaking up?
That's an amazing question. Let me speak to that for a few minutes. I know that there were coworkers of mine that I worked with that were also deeply concerned, and maybe they weren't necessarily like professing Christians, but this is deeply concerning regardless of the fact if you're a person of faith or not. This is harming children. These are hormones that will sterilize them for life, So outside of faith and outside of my faith, I think that an objective person who follows the science, right, will conclude that this is harmful for kids who don't have any idea what they're signing up for when they agree to go down this path. But going back to your question, it's really important to set the stage here, because this hospital is world renowned. It is the most prestigious children's hospital in the nation, if not the world. People come from all corners of the globe for their children to be treated by the best of the best. Wow. And you'll talk to anyone. Like, I thought that this was going to be a dream job for me. I was going to stay there forever. It was, everyone has this reverence and this respect for people who work there at the hospital, who are employed there. And so naturally there's this culture of, you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that position if you're employed there. And it's very scary to go against this massive, gargantuan medical institution for anyone working there. That's how I felt. I felt alone. I felt outnumbered. And I knew that there was going to be consequences to coming forward. So I understand for my coworkers and friends who are still there that there's a definite amount of fear in speaking out and making your voice heard.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. This is in Houston.
Yes.
Houston, Texas. It makes perfect sense that what you just said would be true, that there would be people. I think there's tons of people, Vanessa, just zooming out for a minute, not about this particular case, but about the spread of leftist ideology, pagan sexualism, as I call it. You can call it different things, the LGBTQ, et cetera, agenda. There are lots and lots of people who are not believers, who are profoundly uncomfortable with these things, and they wouldn't articulate it the way you and I would. They wouldn't go to a Bible verse necessarily, right, but they would be very much uncomfortable with what this is doing to kids. It breaks my heart, for example, to hear you talking about how it's not so much the kids from, air quotes, stable families necessarily who are having these puberty blockers prescribed to them and whatever else. It's vulnerable kids. It's kids who have fallen through the cracks, kids in the margins, who are then preyed on by this ideology, which happens, of course, as well with the broader LGBT lobby. It's often, not always, but often kids who really are vulnerable and have this community come toward them with this body of affirmation and so-called love, and that confuses them. Man, I pray that your stand, your clear Christian stand, will help people who are very uncomfortable themselves, not just see that transgenderism as an ideology is wrong or as a practice, but they'll actually be pushed toward Christ. That's my prayer.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So what did you see? You've already referenced this briefly, but what did you see with you being a nurse, you getting into nursing? I am assuming because you want to help people in that respect in the medical profession. What did you see this unsound medical care, air quotes, gender affirming care? What did you see it do to kids? What are some examples? Hey, let me jump out of this discussion for just a second and inform you of something that's pretty important for you to consider. Economists are warning us about massive tax hikes that could hit your IRA and your 401k hard. It's hard to say these words, isn't it? With inflation rising and global uncertainty, it's no wonder central banks and many Americans are turning to gold. Proverbs 21:20 reminds us to preserve what we've built. If you haven't considered gold yet, now's the time. Reach out to Priority Gold to see how they can help you diversify with physical gold and silver. Text GOLDEN to 800-405-GOLD for a free gold info guide and see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Don't wait. Get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Text GOLDEN to 800-405-GOLD to learn more. That's text GOLDEN to 800-405-GOLD. Now let's jump back into our conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember there was one day when at work when I was asked by a transgender doctor to go into a patient's room and to teach this patient how to self-administer an injection at home. And what I didn't realize at the time was that this patient was transgender, and that this patient would utilize what I had taught him to inject estrogen to himself throughout the week to affirm the false identity he had adopted. And it's interesting, your question, because, at first these children who come in, they're very excited about the changes they're seeing in their body. They're very, just very enthusiastic about the growth of facial hair and the deepening of the voice and the masculinization of the facial features with like the sharp jawline or the feminization, however it is. And so, at first you see like a real, this is new. This is a new thing that they're excited to kind of embark on. But then I've just felt like in time that newness kind of wears off, and they're now realizing the implications of the decisions they've made. The longer you're on cross-sex hormones, the more irreversible and the more damaging that they become. And so it's, the enemy, the Bible talks about Satan being the father of lies and the great deceiver, and how he comes to steal, kill, and destroy what God has called good. And this is a great example of that, where children are deceived into believing that this is the solution to their problem. That this is for whatever it is that they're experiencing, whether it's a difficult time going through puberty, whether it's a past of abuse and neglect, and they're trying to fill that pain and that void in their life. With this community of affirming people that say that all you need to do is, maybe you're the opposite sex, maybe you're uncomfortable because you're in the wrong body. So they're seeking that love and that affirmation. And so, of course, as believers, we believe that only Christ can fill that void, and that he is, God's love is ultimately what satisfies and fulfills us. And so, but for these kids, they just don't, and for the parents, I just want to speak to that very briefly, is it's a really, really intimidating thing for a parent to be in a clinic room with their confused child, and a doctor with 10 degrees on the wall in a white lab coat comes into them and says, this is what you need to do, or otherwise your child will harm themselves. They will commit suicide. This is the right course of treatment. This is life-saving. And for parents who are well-meaning, most parents are well-intentioned, well-meaning. They love their children. They want the best for them. They're convinced and manipulated that this is going to help their child. And it's the most egregious form of emotional blackmail that the medical industry has ever peddled to parents. It's so horrific and such a lie. And yet many parents fall into believing that this will help.
That's a really poignant testimony that, I could guess at from the outside, and a lot of listeners or viewers, again, could guess at in terms of how a Christian would react to that, and hearing this kind of wisdom, air quotes, being given, but we've not been in that situation. We've not worked in such a clinic. We don't know what this is like on the inside. We don't know what it's like to sit with a air quotes, gender confused child or something like that and walk them through treatment options. So I really appreciate you giving us that window. I want to get into your background. I want to step out of, again, the situation just for a second. Why did you get into this form of care? It sounds like, of course, I can extrapolate. You didn't get into this nursing profession in this particular area of medicine to confuse children. You, I'm guessing, got into it to help children, and if they're gender confused or however you want to phrase that, to lead them into embracing their body. Why did you get into this realm of medicine in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit of background on me. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, to an amazing, godly Christian family, to parents who love and serve the Lord, and who modeled a biblical worldview to me throughout my life as it relates to social issues, cultural issues, biblical issues. They were, outside of my husband, they're my best friends, and so grateful for their investment and their influence in my life. And so grew up in a wonderful home. I remember in high school taking multiple biblical worldview courses in which I had to defend positions that I either had to refute positions that were not biblically correct with sound biblical theology, or the opposite. And that really solidified my faith, my beliefs. It helped me to understand Christian theology and why we believe what we believe. And so in 2015, I graduated from nursing school here in Houston, and 3 years later found myself accepting an offer from Texas Children's Hospital to work there as a clinic nurse. And like I said previously, this was my dream job. I never thought that I would work at a hospital as prestigious as this one. And I started, for the first 3 years of my nursing career, I started in the cardiology department. So I would work with children and babies born with congenital heart defects that were incompatible with life. And these babies, through a series of medical interventions and surgeries, we would save their life, and they would be optimized and helped and saved. And that contrasted that, like sick children getting well, getting healthy, actual sick children. Contrast that with then healthy children. When I accepted a new role in a different department, I saw healthy children being made sick for life. And the contrast couldn't be more clear. Like their life was not wasn't optimized. Their mental health was not improved. They were just put down this path of harm and psychological and mental trauma and turmoil that comes along with that. And so that contrast couldn't have been more evident.
Wow. That makes perfect sense as you lay it out, and it's heartrending to hear that. But this is what those of us who are trying in a small, humble way to stand in the public square say is going to be felt at the human level if these ideologies, these godless ideologies, are allowed to sweep across our society and culture and take hold. It's not just going to be an ideological battle with two different sides holding placards and opposing one another. It's going to result in real flesh and blood image bearers in doctors' offices being absolutely warped by these ideologies.
Yeah.
Wow. No, you go. Sorry. I'm just musing on what you're thinking, and it's a lot to take in. It's heavy stuff. I'm so thankful you're sharing it. Yeah.
And so if I can transition into last July of 2023, for those of you who don't know, after I came forward anonymously with Christopher Rufo last year, I thought that I just went back to work thinking that things would kind of go on. The law had just been, the bill in Texas had just been passed. And so I was very optimistic that this would result in the end of gender affirming care, quote unquote, in Texas. And so that was a huge encouragement, a huge relief. And so 2 months later, on July 24th of 2023, I was having dinner with friends in my home with my husband, and there was a knock on the front door. And so we go to open the door only to discover that 2 federal agents have been mobilized from the Department of Justice, and they flash their badges. They say they're from the FBI, and they ask to speak with me about issues at my work. And this is now a clip that's been posted on X and viewed over 6 million times, because it's just such a shocking reality of what people of faith, not just me, but others who have come before me, others who will come after me, that when you live out your faith, especially if you're a conservative Christian, that the world will come, the enemy is out to steal, kill, and destroy. And that was very evident on that day. And so these federal agents informed me that I was a person of interest in an investigation relating to a leaker, they called him, who had supposedly, allegedly, violated HIPAA confidentiality by releasing patient information to the public. And so, of course, they were referencing Dr. Heim, who at the time was anonymous. I had no idea who he was, but I knew that someone had come before me to reveal this secret program. And I knew at that moment that the FBI was lying to me, because that was in fact not true, that patient information had been revealed, illegally. And so I said, it's difficult to know what to say, because it's such a moment where you freeze and everything just kind of, your common sense and your reasoning just kind of fly out the window, and you're just kind of paralyzed in fear. And they made some very veiled threats about my work, my safety. They said that they couldn't protect me unless I helped them. And then they left. And in the weeks that followed, it's a very, this kind of experience makes you very paranoid and fearful of what could happen, or the possibilities, or the what ifs, or the unknowns. And it was a really difficult time where we really had to lean into our faith in God, specifically because, first of all, 1 Timothy tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and sound mind. And so we're commanded in the Bible hundreds of times, do not fear, do not be afraid. And yet there's such a temptation that the enemy wants to keep you in this place of fear when you feel like you're out of control, when you don't know the future. And there's a temptation to stay in this hole, in this place of fear and anxiety. And, we resolved at that moment that we would not be silent. We didn't know what that looked like at the time, but we knew we wanted to fight back, and we knew that what had just happened was wrong, and that we would kind of use our voices to elevate the weaponization of the Department of Justice against someone like me. And to be clear, I had done nothing wrong. My only crime was in speaking the truth about what I had seen. The real crime was being done at the hospital. And instead of investigating the hospital for the crimes that they were concealing and doing, they decided to come after a pediatric nurse who exposed what they were doing.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I don't think I was aware of that. And I don't think I saw that video. I think I was on family vacation around that time, so I missed that. But wow, again, to be a little bit incoherent here, I'm really thankful that you're sharing that with us. And that, again, is an example of what we know will happen if free speech continues to erode, if the left continues to gain ground in America, et cetera, and so on. But you've lived this, and you've experienced, I would say, literal intimidation of the enemy to try and stop you and silence you and block you from a righteous course of action. I am so thankful that you have not fallen silent, and you have not lost your Christ-granted courage. And I'm so thankful you showed up for your shift, so to speak. We're winding toward a conclusion in terms of time. This is a fantastic conversation, Vanessa. Thank you very much for sharing all of this. You've just been recently fired from Texas Children's Hospital, which I imagine, your stand is a righteous one. I agree with you fully in that, completely. Glad to put it on public record face to face. But that's also got to be challenging. Are you looking for work now? How can Christians pray for you, help you, point us that direction?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Because I believe that the hospital retaliated against me for blowing the whistle on the fraud and on the misuse of funds, I have retained attorneys to challenge this decision in court. But that is a very costly legal battle, and that's one I'm committed to, but it's also very expensive. So I've set up a Give, Send, Go, and it's Give, Send, Go nurse_whistleblower. And I just have to say first that so many people and people of God and people of faith have reached out and they've donated. They've sent messages of encouragement and support. And I could not be more grateful for the army of prayer warriors that have risen and rallied behind me. So I'm so grateful for that. But I would just love my personal email, and my story is on that page. And I would just love to hear from people and would just love the prayers.
Definitely. And I have to also say, I've seen Family Research Council, for which you interned some years ago, and which I currently serve as a senior fellow of the Center for Biblical Worldview. I've seen them champion your cause. Very thankful for that organization. Alliance Defending Freedom does similar work. So praise God, by the way. It can be easy to kind of be like, politics isn't that important. The public square doesn't matter. It's the church. These are things I talk about a lot on this podcast. But then you hit moments like this. And I can't speak for you, but I assume you are grateful that there are Christians in the public square along those lines.
Oh, I couldn't be more thankful. And I would say a huge thank you to the Family Research Council, because 3 years ago, I applied to their internship program with zero connections and zero political knowledge or experience. I was just a random nurse from Texas, and they took a huge chance on me and they accepted me into their program. And now I am so honored to have their support and their encouragement. And you just never know how God will use you where he's placed you. And that's just a testament to the faithfulness and the goodness of God. Amen.
Well, I'm a worker with the James Dobson Family Institute. I can't speak for the organization as a whole or something like that, but I can absolutely say I'll be speaking about this to leaders there and trying to help spread the word about your righteous cause. I am so blessed by your public faith and your public courage. It's Esther-like. It really is. And I think the Lord, I'm sure there's a lot of hardship that we're not seeing behind the scenes, tears and that sort of thing, loss of a job. But I think the Lord raised you up for such a time as this to be a player in the multi-campaign war against godless ideology that is destroying children. And I'm so thankful for that. And just know you have my prayers as you go.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's such an honor.
Okay. Well, my guest has been Vanessa Sivadge, and I do encourage you to check out that Give, Send, Go. I'm going to be putting it on my social media. So if you're watching this or listening to this and you didn't quite catch that hyperlink, it will be on my X posting. I guess I can't say Twitter anymore, my X posting and my social media, because I am no William Wilberforce or no media guru, but I'm going to try to ring the bell on this myself. So I'm so thankful for Vanessa's courage and her time being on the podcast. And I encourage all of you to not just listen to this conversation and not just give thanks to God for Vanessa's clear stand for Christ, but think in your own lane, even if it's a small little circle of influence. How can you be salt and light as our sister has been? God bless you.